In this week's episode, I'm joined by Deepak Ravindran, the co-founder of Oddbox, the UK's first sustainable fruit and veg box delivery service. He's currently an executive coach for startup founders and leaders. In this episode, Deepak shares the personal and leadership lessons behind building a food waste fighting business, from early doubts and bold career moves to burnout, identity shifts, and the surprising ways failure shaped the journey. Hi Deepak, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey in co-founding Oddbox?
Firstly, thank you for having me here. Appreciate it. I could just go back a few years. 20 years ago, I was in corporate finance and then made the switch to investment banking about 10 years ago. I got tired with the whole kind of corporate treadmill and also kind of working on something without purpose. So I did Escape the City's startup incubator, and as a result, discovered my passion triangle, which we'll talk about a bit later, which is fitness, food, or having an impact, environmental or social. And as a result, I became a personal trainer. It's about 10 years ago, mainly to work with people one-on-one to make them a better version of themselves, working on their mindsets and behavior. And then Emily, my wife, and I went away to Portugal on holiday. We came across, if you've been to Portugal, you come across local street markets, and we came across this kind of really, remember this vividly, tomato stall, completely ugly looking tomatoes, but deliciously tasting tomatoes. And we always wondered, what happens in the UK? We don't get these tomatoes in our local Sainsbury's. That piqued our interest, and we came across the problem of food waste that happens at a farm level. So up to 40% of produce doesn't even leave the farm gates because of the size, shape, or color, or because there's surplus to requirements. And that means all of this produce that's edible for human consumption that either reaches landfill or goes to wholesale markets, and therefore there's a big risk of it going to waste. And so we decided we do a fruit and veg box because there was a couple of organizations in the US that were doing something similar. And that idea resonated with us because of two reasons. One is we naively thought fresh produce was easy to deal with. Surely we can go to a grower, get some produce and deliver to people's homes. That was easy, which was kind of a big error in hindsight, fresh produce being tricky and all that. And second, more importantly, we wanted to have a medium to communicate the story of the grower, what happens behind the scenes on a farm, what happens because of climate change and so on. So there were a lot of stories that were happening behind the scenes, and we want to really elevate food waste and bring it to the common person and talk about that in an easy manner. And so that was the kind of whole, origin story of Oddbox.
The story is truly amazing, and to even have the guts and courage to leave something that was a bit more secure in finance to follow passion is something that I know a lot of founders listening, a lot of leaders listening to this episode could relate to. Has there been a moment or a few moments in that journey where you thought it wouldn't work? Because it sounds like it worked. But let's unpack that a little bit.
I mean, there were so many moments, man. I mean, the first 3 years were absolutely brutal. No holidays, no salary, and really no real external validation. The growers we spoke to the early days, I mean, we thought we were helping them, but because they had priced the waste in their kind of profit and loss, whatever account, for them that was not waste. So they were like, there's no waste. And it took us a long time to convince the growers that there was the environmental waste, the waste of resources, not just the financial waste, which is where kind of growers were coming from, because they were literally kind of pennies and pounds really for them. And then the customers were asking us when we were doing local markets, just to kind of market Oddbox, they were asking us, well, it's waste. Does it come from a supermarket skip? So there was this kind of connotation that waste is rubbish, right? And people don't associate fresh produce with waste. That kind of just goes against the normal grain of thinking. So that we took a long time to convince customers that this was at the risk of going to waste, not waste. And also this is coming straight from the farm. It's not coming from a supermarket skip. And then finally, from a when you speak to people in the industry, a lot of people were telling us this would never work. Building a business on the availability of waste meant that, according to them, that we would run out of produce at some point. And so they said this would never work simply because you'll run out of produce at some point, and therefore you won't have enough supply. And you're competing against supermarkets who also have their own wonky ranges. So I think we were just hit by a lot of naysayers at the start. And yeah, again, many a time we were just thinking, this really won't work. It's low margin business. We didn't really think about raising money for the first 3 years, 2.5 years actually. And then it was a really kind of operationally heavy business as well. And when you are in an operationally heavy business, as you probably know, it is literally physical labor,
absolutely,
for pennies and pounds, really. And you go, what am I doing this for?
How did you keep that confidence over that 3 years?
I think for me, it came down to this kind of mindset that going back to my corporate career, a salaried job, would have been, actually, at least that's a narrative that I told myself, would have been a failure. So I left banking with no plan B. And there was a point I want to kind of prove as well to myself, not to anyone else, to myself, that there is life beyond. I could make my own way, because a number of people told me, including my mom and my friends, that I'm being absolutely stupid, leaving a well-paying job and venturing off into the unknown without any particular idea, because I left and became a personal trainer. But somewhere within me, I think there was this kind of feeling that success, or what success meant, was this kind of externally, I suppose, projected version of success, which meant having a good salary, money in the bank, etc., etc. And I think when you go down that path of what is someone else's version of success, you reach that point and you realize, well, that might have been true for so far, but that's not going to be the future version of success. And the future version of success is for me at that point in time, is working on something that was had an impact. I want to leave a legacy, not just a financial legacy and money in the bank for my children, but really this legacy that I've attempted, at least tried, having a crack at something that is really important for the world. And for me, at that point in time, food waste and having an environmental impact and bringing something to life through the medium of stories, i.e. the growers' stories, was far important than success or failure. So for me, at that point in time, failure would have been going back to my corporate job, which obviously was there. I could have still gone back. So that was what was driving me.
It sounds like, you weren't entrepreneurial as a kid. You went very corporate finance, and you took a jump and you became entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
Help us understand, like, when things became good and, Oddbox became Oddbox, you no longer needed to introduce what it was to people. How did you handle this new position, and what are some of the things you started to think about when it came to making decisions? Was finance and what you did in that first 3 years still the same thing that kept you going, or was your framework of thinking different?
Yeah, so just a bit of context here. When the first, in 2020, when the first lockdown hit, a lot of businesses suffered through that. On the flip side, D2C businesses thrived, and we were on the kind of receiving end of that really kind of focus on people getting fruit and veg, and they couldn't get access to it. So our business grew sixfold in 6 months, and we had this huge influx of customers. The team grew from 25 to 100 people in 12 months. We had investors knocking on the door. To be fair, in hindsight, we never stopped to celebrate the success of external success, right? Because internally we were going, we've got to do this, we've got to do that, we've got to do this. I think in 2020 as well, like a personal story, is we adopted our daughter, who was 18 months old, she's 6 now. And it was a point when there was a personal priorities were changing internally.
Yeah.
That, along with the growth that we had, also meant that although it was externally, people would say that's amazing, internally I was not feeling successful. My priorities had shifted with new investors who kind of invested. We had a 9-figure valuation and all that. there was a slowdown which happened in 21, 22 with the war in Ukraine, cost of living crisis and all that.
Market correction.
And the business started really kind of seeing rough weather. We were running out of cash. And this is what happens in a business cycle, right? Yeah. You see the peak and you see the trough next year. And it's so fast that it happens. You don't have time to really celebrate success in a way. And all that meant that I was kind of dying inside. I was disengaging with the business. Investors were piling on pressure. And essentially I burnt out during that process, which is a shame because literally we were seeing success through the tough years when we were kind of seeing like really, it was a grind. I didn't have burnout. But when we actually hit the pinnacle of success and we started seeing a slowdown is when I started feeling burnt out because I realized my identity was getting really entwined with the business identity. So to answer your question, I don't think I really celebrated. We were not good at celebrating and stopping and celebrating success. We were just moving on and on and on, faster and faster.
Big thanks to Hiscox for supporting this podcast. Whether you're a sole trader, scaling a startup, or running a growing enterprise, Hiscox Business Insurance could protect you if the worst happens. Their policies are built around your business to protect you from the real risk you face every day. Head to hiscox.co.uk/business insurance to learn more. It sounds like you've made a transition. Your business was your identity. It sounds like. How have you navigated creating a different identity for yourself away from the business, and what things have you learned in this process that you hope other business owners can take from this?
I realized that I don't have the energy to give what the business needed for the next 3 to 5 years. And I had an honest conversation with my wife first, who's also the CEO, and the rest of the board, that I'm better off working on, not on the day-to-day, but on a non-exec basis. And then that'll allow me to go back to what gives me energy and go back to pursuing what would be my North Star, which is kind of helping people one-to-one, making them a better version of themselves. I think it was a process that I went through, but it came on the back of a bit of a personal kind of slump and harsh learning, but a lot of work behind the scenes to working with a coach, working with a therapist, and realizing that I was not the business, number one, and my role as co-founder was not the only role that I have in my life. I have other roles in my life as a husband, as a son, as a father, and co-founder was just one of those roles. And I also had a role of taking care of myself, and realizing that I had these different roles to play essentially grounds me even today, that even if a role doesn't go that well, you know what? I'm still going to progress in other roles in my life. So my purpose is not just my business. My purpose is a lot bigger than my business.
Oh, I love that. How have you used failure as a catalyst in your different moves? And maybe talk a little bit about what you do coaching-wise, because you're doing some awesome work with people right now, and it sounds like you're hitting your North Star from what you said, right? So you can just talking to you even before this episode, it just comes out naturally when we bring it up.
Now, failure is an interesting word, isn't it? Like when I used to think about failure meant personal. It was meant I was failing, myself was failing. And that was a much tougher pill to swallow than saying I failed at something. I failed at an experiment. It was a setback. And so I've learned over time to call, not use the word failure because it somehow feels personal, at least maybe the word that I associate with myself, and maybe term it as failing on something, on an experiment, which then allows you to dust yourself up and move on. It's about just picking yourself up and move on, rather than, it's a failure, I'm a failure, which is a very strong phrase to say. So I think that would be my kind of one reframe that I've made for myself in my life, that all of this is just things that you have setbacks in your life, and that's okay. And you learn and move on.
As a coach, coach, you're in your North Star bag right now. You're helping people through a whole bunch of different issues.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you you're finding often that you're deploying and saying to people that maybe people at home right now or wherever they're listening can kind of like think about as they're stepping into their work?
Yeah. And I think when I speak to founders, a lot of them associate these setbacks as something that is related to them personally. I think holding the mirror to them and explaining to them that what they're going through is quite common in the founder community, and it's not personal. And yes, there are some blind spots that people have. Yes, there are some points of self-awareness that they should have. And that's where, as a coach, I come in and hold that mirror to them and say that it's not personal, number one, and B, that other people are going through something similar. And there are ways of mitigating these kind of setbacks by having a more structured, perhaps data-driven approach to it, rather than just kind of assuming that I'm who I am, or I'm not succeeding because of my past patterns and behavior. That's one. Second is a lot of times people are, I feel, very execution focused, and sometimes don't spend enough time planning and thinking about the future and thinking about the vision and the why. And so kind of sometimes, very tactically speaking, sometimes building time in your calendar during the week to focus on the future and envisioning the future and thinking about the why and re-emphasizing the why sometimes puts things into perspective, even if things are not going well. Otherwise, you are so focused on doing the things on a day-to-day basis. And if things go well, you're happy. Things don't go well, you're not unhappy, right? It's like a sales cycle. You get some new clients, yay, it's champagne time. You don't get some new clients, or you get decline. You're like, the whole world has come to a grinding halt. So I think grounding yourself in the future state, in the vision, and kind of re-emphasizing the why, make sure that you are always clear with why you're doing this. Why did you start this in the first place? And I think that's the second thing I try to bring the founders I coach around as to what is important about this. Is it earning money on a monthly basis? Is it having an impact? What is it? Why did you start this? I think that then brings the bigger picture to perspective, rather than this kind of small failures or kind of setbacks. I think that, and the third bit is it's realizing that when you, especially kind of this happens during fundraising or you're pitching to investors, you hear 99 no's before you hear the single yes, and knowing that that is the way to it. That's just the way that you've got to hear 99 no's before you hear the one yes, and that's because you yourself, when you first start pitching, are not clear with the pitch, are not convinced with the pitch, and you just have an idea and you're refining. You've got to refine your pitch and what you're saying, whether that's a sales pitch to your customers or your investor pitch to investors, until you are convinced deeply by what you're selling. And that's just the way it is. You've got to go through those no's to get to a yes. So again, this is reframing that to say, you know what, I'm going to take that as a learning opportunity and become better in my next pitch. So by the 99th time, or whatever the time it is, you get to a place where you go, you know what, I'm going to nail this pitch. And so it is just the journey that people go on. There's nothing personal. There's the third thing I'd say.
I'm sure overwhelm has been consistent throughout. Let's wrap on that thing for people today. Yeah. How can they take what you said today, but not let it overwhelm them? Because I feel like this is something they need to come back and sit on, like simmer, like a glass of wine.
Yeah, absolutely. I think overwhelm happens, again, going back to my earlier point, is because you've got far too much work than time, right? You're always playing catch up with time when you're a founder, because you're putting several hats on once, right? I mean, a team, you'd have a 10-member team doing what you do as a founder. You're marketing, you're selling, you are talking to customers, you're operational, you're doing everything right at the start. And so it is, as the nature of the beast is, it is bound to get overwhelmed. So I think a couple of things there is, and again, I know this is hard when time is really hard to kind of keep track of, is again, can you come back to can you build slots in your calendar to come back to the why and the purpose and the vision. I think that would be my kind of, or if you can't do that, can you work with a coach who can keep you accountable to kind of coming back to your why and your purpose? Again, number two is, again, what is your, again, link to that is what are your values? Why are you doing this? Are you doing this for just money? Or are you doing this for autonomy over your time, your location perhaps? Coming back to that. Because if you are doing, for that, then is this ticking the box?
Yeah.
Else, what is plan B? What's because the grass on the greener side sometimes seems nice. It'd be amazing if I go and work for someone, right? But actually, are you getting, so is that important? So is autonomy over time and location important for you? Because if it is, then you won't get that working for someone. So again, bringing that back to your values and your North Star, again, helps as well.
Where can people find you?
So I've got a website now. It's my first name, Deepak-Ravindran.com. And then on LinkedIn as well, Deepak Ravindran Coaching.
You've been watching the Small Business Sessions Founder Fails podcast, brought to you by Enterprise Nation in collaboration with Hiscox. Big thanks to Hiscox for supporting this podcast. Whether you're a sole trader, scaling a startup, or running a growing enterprise, Hiscox Business Insurance could protect you if the worst happens. Their policies are built around your business to protect you from the real risk you face every day. Head to hiscox.co.uk/business insurance to learn more. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you next time.